On my 29th birthday, I thought things were finally getting better. I had spent the last 5 years living in my grandmother's old house, slowly fixing it up by myself. Please stay with me as I share what happened next. Like, share, and subscribe to hear the full story of how I stood up after being betrayed by my own family. The house was falling apart when I first moved in, but I worked hard. I painted the walls, repaired broken things, and made it feel like a real home again. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It felt like the one place where I belonged. That day, my parents invited me over for a small birthday celebration. I didn't expect anything big, but I was happy just to be remembered. They handed me a shiny silver envelope. I smiled, thinking maybe it was a birthday card or something kind. But when I opened it, my smile froze. It was an eviction notice. My parents were kicking me out of the house I had spent years restoring. I was shocked and confused. Before I could say anything, I saw my cousin Ivy standing nearby, smiling like she had planned it all. She told me calmly that the house would be sold to a developer named Max Harper. I could barely believe what I was hearing. The home I had cared for, the place full of memories, was being taken away from me just like that. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just smiled again, but this time, it was different. It was the kind of smile you give when you're done being nice. I decided I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't fight with anger or tears. I would fight with truth. They didn't know everything I had done for that house. They didn't know how strong I had become. Ivy thought she could take everything from me and walk away, but she was wrong. My parents thought I would stay quiet, but they didn't know the real me. That night, I didn't sleep. I started thinking, planning. If they wanted a fight, I was ready. I wasn't just going to protect a house. I was going to protect my story, my work, and my truth. After the shock of being handed an eviction notice on my 29th birthday, I knew there had to be more to the story. Ivy didn't just smile like she had won. She acted like she had already cleared every obstacle in her path. I had a feeling something was off, so I decided to start digging. I wasn't going to let them take the house without understanding how they even had the right. A few days later, I met with Emma, my closest friend, and the kind of person who could find anything online if she tried hard enough. She was calm, smart, and always ready to help. When I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate. "Let's start with the permits," she said. We checked the city's public records system, but something felt strange right away. The files showing my renovations were labeled unauthorized. Ivy had told my parents I made illegal changes to the property. That's why they believed I had to leave. But that wasn't true. I had filed for approvals. I had copies at home. So why did the city show something different? Emma kept digging and noticed something odd in the permit files. Some signatures didn't match, and a few forms looked like they were scanned in from old templates. We decided to visit the city office in person, hoping someone there could help us figure it out. That's when we met Chloe. She worked at the records desk and had been there for years. I explained what was happening and showed her both my copies and the ones in their system. She looked confused at first, then her face changed. "These permits in our system aren't real," she said softly. "Whoever submitted them must have forged the files. These forms were phased out 2 years ago." I asked if any complaints had ever been filed by neighbors about noise or unsafe construction, something Ivy had mentioned to justify the house being taken down. Chloe checked. Nothing. Not a single complaint. No record at all. It was all made up. Emma and I stepped out of the office in silence. It was clear now. Ivy had forged permits and created a fake paper trail to make it look like I had broken city rules. That gave them the reason to start the eviction. And now, I found out the house wasn't just being sold. It was marked for demolition. My stomach turned. Everything I had worked for wasn't just being taken. It was being erased. But now I had proof that something wasn't right. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a lie built on fraud. And I wasn't going to stay quiet. After finding out that the permits were fake and there were no complaints from neighbors, I felt more hurt, but also more determined. Someone had worked hard to make it all look legal. I knew Ivy had a big part in this, but I started to wonder, who else knew the truth? That's when I started thinking about my brother, Daniel. Daniel and I weren't very close anymore. After our grandmother passed, he drifted away from the family. He didn't help with the house or visit often, but he always treated me kindly. When all this started, he had looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. I needed to know why. I called him and asked to meet. He agreed, but his voice was quiet, like he already knew what I wanted to ask. When we sat down, he didn't even wait for me to speak. His eyes were full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you earlier." I listened as he explained everything. Ivy had gone to our parents months ago with a plan. She showed them papers that made it seem like I didn't own the house properly, and that I had done illegal work on it. She told them if they sold it to Max Harper, a developer, they'd get a big payment, enough to retire early, enough to forget all their money problems. My parents believed her because the documents looked official. Daniel said he tried to speak up, but Ivy warned him to stay out of it, that if he said anything, he'd be cut off from the deal too. He was scared, but now he couldn't keep it to himself anymore. Then he pulled out something that changed everything. A blueprint. It was printed on glossy paper with clean lines and bold letters. At the top, it said, Willow Heights Luxury Condos, and just beneath that, in bold black print, 197 Willow Street, demolition site. That was my house, my home, the one I rebuilt. I stared at the paper in disbelief. It was all real. Ivy hadn't just planned to take the house. She and Max had already started designing what would replace it. They wanted to tear it down and build fancy apartments in its place. Daniel apologized again, but I was too shocked to speak. I thanked him for finally telling me the truth, but inside, I felt something stronger than sadness or anger. I felt ready. They had the blueprints. But now, I had the truth, and someone from the inside who had finally decided to stand with me. This wasn't over, not even close. After learning about the blueprints and Daniel's confession, I knew I needed legal help. The lies were bigger than I thought, and I didn't want to make any mistakes. So I reached out to Sarah, a lawyer recommended by Emma. She was sharp, calm, and had handled property fraud cases before. When I told Sarah everything that had happened so far, she listened carefully, taking notes. Then she asked to see every document Ivy and my parents had used in the property transfer. I had copies. Daniel gave me what he could, and I had saved a few from earlier days. Sarah looked through them slowly, then paused at one page. Her eyes narrowed. "Do you know who notarized this?" she asked, pointing to the notary stamp at the bottom of one of the property transfer forms. I looked closer. The name printed beside the stamp was Ivy's mother, Aunt Rachel. She was a notary public years ago, but I hadn't heard her mention it in a long time. Sarah noticed my confusion and flipped open her laptop. She typed for a while, then looked up. "This stamp expired 3 years ago," she said. "She wasn't legally allowed to notarize anything after that." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the notarization is invalid," Sarah replied, her voice serious. "And if she knowingly used an expired seal to process a property transfer, that's felony fraud." Felony. The word felt heavy. This wasn't just sneaky paperwork anymore. It was a crime. Real consequences. Jail time. Sarah told me not to worry. This was the kind of proof that could stop the sale, maybe even reverse everything. But at the same time, she warned me to be careful. People who commit fraud don't always react well when they're cornered. That night, I found out exactly what she meant. I had just come home after meeting with Sarah and was parking my car outside. The street was quiet. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crash shattered the silence, and my windshield. A rock had smashed straight through the glass. My hands shook as I reached down to find a folded note taped to the stone. It had only 2 words, written in black marker. "Back off." My chest tightened. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I was getting close to the truth, and they didn't want me digging any further. But instead of scaring me, it made me more certain. They were worried, and that meant I had something powerful. The truth. I took a deep breath, picked up the rock, and took a photo of the note. I wasn't backing off. Not now. Not ever. They started this with lies. I was going to end it with the truth. After everything that had happened, the fake documents, the expired notary stamp, and the rock through my windshield, I had started to feel like I was fighting this battle alone. I had Sarah, Emma, and Daniel on my side, but everyone else involved seemed determined to silence me. I didn't know how far Ivy and Max would go to keep their plan alive, but I knew they weren't finished yet. Then something unexpected happened. I received a message through Emma. It was simple. "Meet me at Hillview Cafe at 7 p.m. Come alone. Lena Harper, Max's younger sister." I had only met her once in passing, years ago. She seemed quiet and distant, not the type to get involved in real estate deals or family drama. I wasn't sure if it was a trap or a real offer to talk, but something about the message felt sincere, so I went. When I walked into the cafe, Lena was already there. She looked nervous, like someone who had been carrying a secret for too long. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I know what Ivy and Max are doing," she said in a low voice, "and I think it's wrong." I blinked, surprised. She continued, "I've seen the papers. I've read the emails. Ivy thinks she's clever, but she left a trail. She told Max everything would be done by the time of their engagement party. That's when she plans to fully take control of your house." I didn't say anything, just stared at her. waiting. Lena reached into her bag and pulled out 2 small USB drives. She slid them across the table toward me. These have copies of the emails Ivy sent to Max and my parents. There's also a recording, Ivy saying, "No one can stop us now." She laughed after she said it, like it was all just a game to her. I picked up the drives with shaking hands. This wasn't just paperwork. It was proof, straight from their inner circle. Things they said when they thought no one else was listening. "I can't let them get away with this," Lena whispered. "You're not just fighting for a house. You're fighting against 2 people who think money and power let them do anything they want." I looked her in the eyes. She wasn't doing this for attention or drama. She truly wanted to help. Maybe she had seen too much from the inside. Maybe she was tired of staying quiet. Before she left, she said one more thing. "They think you're alone in this. Make sure they see you're not." That night, I sat in front of my laptop, headphones on, listening to Ivy's voice on the recording, calm, cold, and full of pride. They thought no one could stop them. They were wrong. That evening, I came home feeling more hopeful than I had in a long time. With Lena's help and the evidence she gave me, it felt like things were finally turning in my favor. But that feeling didn't last long. As I walked up to my front porch, I saw a small box sitting by my door. There was no name on it, no note, just a plain brown box taped shut. I looked around, but the street was empty, no one in sight. I brought it inside, placed it on the table, and slowly opened it. Inside, there were printed photos, dozens of them. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but then I saw it clearly. Each photo was of a different room in my house. My bedroom, the kitchen, the basement, even the tiny closet where I kept my tools. Someone had taken pictures of every corner of my home, and on each photo, in thick red marker, was an XA big red X right across the center, as if someone was marking them for destruction. My hands began to shake. I flipped through all the photos, trying to make sense of it. That's when I realized the truth. They had been inside. These photos weren't taken from a window or through a camera. Whoever did this had walked through my house, room by room, while I was gone. I sat down, trying to breathe. I kept asking myself how they could have gotten in. I always locked the doors, and only a few people had a key. Then something clicked in my mind. My mother. I remembered her coming over a few weeks ago, asking to borrow something. She had used my house key then. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I knew. Ivy must have convinced her to hand over the key, or maybe she just took it without asking. Either way, she had gotten inside. I felt angry, but more than that, I felt exposed, violated. This was more than a legal fight now. It was personal. They wanted me scared. They wanted me to feel powerless in my own home, but I wasn't going to let that happen. The next morning, I went out and bought small security cameras. I placed them around the house, hidden in shelves, corners, and even in the hallway. If they came back, I would see them. I would record everything. No more secrets. No more sneaking around. They had crossed a line by entering my home without permission. Now, I was watching. I didn't know what they would try next, but I was ready for it. After the break-in and the photos, I knew I had to do something big. Just collecting proof wasn't enough anymore. I needed to show everyone what Ivy and Max had done. I couldn't fight them quietly. It had to be loud. It had to be public. One evening, I met Lena again. She seemed more serious than before, as if something important was about to happen. She handed me a small envelope and said, "This is your way in." Inside, there was a blank press pass. I looked at her, confused. "Ivy's engagement party is in a few days," she said. "It's a big event, lots of important people, investors, friends, family. If you want to stop them, that's the place." I stared at the pass, trying to imagine myself walking into their perfect, shiny celebration with the truth in my hands. It felt bold, maybe even risky, but I also knew it might be my only real chance. Lena gave me a nod. "Unmask them where it hurts." After she left, I sat at my desk and pulled out all the things I'd collected so far. The fake permits, the stolen notary stamp, the photos, the emails Lena gave me, the audio of Ivy bragging, and the blueprints that showed my house already labelled for demolition. I opened a new folder and carefully started putting it all together, page by page, file by file. I made copies of everything. I didn't want to just tell people the truth. I wanted to show it. I wanted them to see Ivy for who she really was. I spent the next few days working quietly. I organised everything into a clean, clear dossier. No extra drama. Just facts, dates, signatures, photos, audio. and all of it pointed to one thing: lies. I also printed out a short statement, something I could say if I had the chance. Not angry or loud, but firm and honest. I wanted them to hear the truth, not just from paper, but from my voice. The night before the party, I stood in front of my mirror, holding the pass. I still felt nervous, but underneath the nerves, I felt ready. They had tried to erase me. They thought I would hide, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I had the truth, and now, I had a way to make sure everyone else heard it too. The evening of the engagement party arrived. The Bellevue Grand was glowing with lights. Expensive cars lined the entrance, and people in elegant clothes walked inside, smiling and laughing. The whole event looked perfect from the outside, just like Ivy would have wanted. I walked in through the side entrance, using the press pass Lena gave me. No one questioned me. I wore simple black and carried a small shoulder bag with the folder inside. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. I kept telling myself, "You've come too far to back down now." Inside, the ballroom was shining. Chandeliers sparkled, music played softly, and servers walked around with drinks on trays. Ivy stood near the center in a long silver dress, holding Max's arm. She looked proud, confident, and completely unaware of what was about to happen. I walked around the edges of the room, staying quiet, unnoticed. I found the projector set up near the back wall. It was already running, showing pictures of Ivy and Max, vacations, parties, their perfect life together. I waited until the speeches were about to begin. Max was tapping a glass, calling for attention. "Thank you all for being here," he started. "Tonight we celebrate love, family, and new beginnings." That's when I stepped forward. No one saw me at first. I walked straight to the projector, plugged in my own USB, and switched the feed. Suddenly, the screen went black. Then a new image appeared, the blueprint labeled Willow Heights Luxury Condos. The crowd quieted. Murmurs filled the room. More images followed. Emails between Ivy and Max. Scanned documents showing the fake notary stamp. Photos of the house marked with red X's. I stepped into the light. "That's my house," I said, my voice loud and clear. "They plan to steal it using lies and fraud." Gasps echoed. Ivy's smile dropped. Max froze. Investors turned to each other, whispering. I clicked again. The audio started to play. Ivy's voice filled the ballroom, sharp and smug. "No one can stop us now." I looked straight at Ivy. "You were wrong," I said. "I stopped you." Some people began recording on their phones. A few investors walked out quietly. Others looked angry and shocked. Ivy tried to speak, but nothing came out. She stood there, caught. The truth was no longer just mine. Now the whole room saw it, and I wasn't afraid anymore. After the audio played in the ballroom, and everyone saw the proof on the screen, the room changed. The smiles disappeared. The music stopped. It felt like the air had frozen. People stood still, some whispering, some just staring at Ivy and Max. But it wasn't over yet. I stepped aside, and that's when Sarah, my lawyer, entered the room. She walked in calmly, holding a black folder in her hand. She had asked me earlier if she should come to the party, just in case things got serious. I said yes, and now I was glad she was there. Sarah walked to the center of the ballroom, near where Ivy and Max were standing. She introduced herself, then opened her folder and began handing copies of the legal evidence to a few key people. Some investors, a reporter she had quietly contacted, and 2 plainclothes police officers who had come with her. "I have documents showing forged signatures, expired seals, and planned property fraud," Sarah said. Her voice was strong, steady, and clear. "This is not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This is a felony." Everyone heard her. People began talking louder now, clearly upset. One man, a major investor, shook his head and said, "I put money into this project. I didn't know any of this." Then the audio played again, just one line, but it was loud and clear across the speakers. "After tonight, we bulldoze Olivia's life." Ivy's voice, cold and confident. That was the final blow. The 2 officers walked over to Ivy. She looked shocked, her mouth slightly open. "Wait, you can't be serious," she said, but they didn't listen. One officer pulled out handcuffs. "You're being arrested for fraud and forgery," he said. "You have the right to remain silent." Max backed away slowly, as if trying to disappear into the crowd, but the damage was done. Investors were already leaving, some shaking their heads, others furious. His perfect project had fallen apart in front of everyone. Ivy didn't fight. She just stood there as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Her silver dress didn't shine the same anymore. I watched it all happen, quiet and still. My heart beat fast, but I felt calm. This time, I didn't have to speak. The truth had done all the talking. As the police walked Ivy out of the ballroom, I looked around. People were still stunned. Some gave me looks of respect. Some just looked confused. But I knew one thing for sure. It was over. Months passed after everything that happened. Things slowly calmed down. The house was finally safe, and it fully belonged to me. But it felt different now. Not just a house, but a place that had survived something big and stood strong. I spent the next few weeks working on small repairs. I painted the walls again, cleaned every corner, and fixed the garden. Flowers bloomed along the fence, and the wind felt softer. Some neighbors I had never talked to before stopped by to say kind things. Their support made everything feel lighter. One warm afternoon, I invited a few people over, just the ones who had been with me through it all. Emma brought sweet snacks, Daniel helped set up chairs, and Lena brought drinks. We sat in the backyard, under the trees, sharing simple moments. No drama, no tension, just quiet joy. Near the front door, we had placed a small bronze sign. It said, "The Rickman House, a living legacy." I chose those words to remember my grandmother, who once lived here and filled the house with warmth. It was also a way to show that this home still had meaning, even after everything it had been through. Lena stood up with a glass in her hand. She looked around at everyone, and then at me. "You didn't just keep the house," she said. "You reminded us to speak up when something is wrong. You showed us how to stay strong and not give up." Everyone nodded and raised their glasses with her. I felt something quiet and deep in that moment. Relief, pride, and peace. I looked at the house. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Not just because of paper or law, but because I protected it. And now, it could be a place full of life once again. Do you think I did the right thing by exposing my own family in front of everyone? Or should I have handled it more quietly? I'd really like to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about standing up for what's right, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.